Good evening, Commissioners, staff and members of the public. I declare the Special Council meeting of Thursday, 19 March 2026 open at 5:30 p.m. I wish to acknowledge the Gadiada people as the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on. I recognise their strength and resilience and pay my respects to their elders past and present. This meeting is being live streamed and audio recorded to facilitate community participation and for minute-taking purposes, which may be released upon request to third parties. In accordance with Clause 6.16 of the Town of Port Hedland Standing Orders Local Law 2014, members of the public are not permitted to use any visual or audio electronic device or instrument to record the proceedings of any meeting unless that person has been given permission by the presiding member to do so. Members of the public are also reminded that in accordance with Clause 6.174 of the Standing Orders, mobile telephones must be switched off and not used during the meeting. Attendance is as displayed on the screen, and noting Commissioners Shaw and Commissioner Jurovic are joining us along with Director Leeson by instantaneous communications. CEO, do we have any apologies?
None received.
Item 3.4, approval of leave of absence. CEO, do we have any applications for leave of absence?
None received, Chair.
Item 3.5, disclosures of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest for any of the items in the agenda this evening? No declarations.
No, thank you.
I'll now seek a mover for a procedural motion that Council amend the 19 March 2026 Special Council Meeting Order of Business as set out in Council Policy 1/017 to deal with Item 6, announcements by the presiding member without discussion before Item 4, public time. Do I have a mover for that motion?
So moved.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Jurovic, and seconded by Commissioner Shaw. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? If not, I'll declare the motion carried by simple majority. Good evening, Commissioners, staff, members of the public. You will note that Commissioners Shaw and Jurovic have been authorised pursuant to Town Policy 4/011 to attend tonight's meeting electronically. As a result, I have the pleasure of presiding at this meeting. I'd like to take this opportunity to provide some updates to the community, noting that we have an ordinary council meeting scheduled for next Wednesday. As the community may be aware, the Local Government Inspector, Mr Tony Brown, has appointed a monitor pursuant to the Local Government Act 1995 to the Town of Port Hedland. Mr Andrew Hammond has been appointed for a period commencing 4 March 2026 and ending on 19 August 2026. I welcome the appointment of a monitor whose terms of appointment include the development of a forward improvement plan and preparation of the elected member induction program in conjunction with the town, among other near-term priorities. I'm confident that the monitor will also play a key role in the orderly transition of power from commissioners to an elected council and from a temporary to a substantive CEO, which will all occur during his tenure. The town's election is progressing under the control of the WA Electoral Commission and its appointed returning officer. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind electors to participate in this election by completing and returning your postal ballot. As of yesterday, the Electoral Commission has advised it has received 1,716 ballots returned, which represents 19% of the total ballots issued to electors. Ballots must be received by the returning officer by 6 p.m. on Saturday the 28th of March. To avoid postage-related delays, I would strongly recommend, as we approach the final week of the election, that ballots are returned to one of our 2 polling places, either here at the Civic Centre or at the South Hedland Library, both which will be accessible from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. on Saturday the 28th of March. Earlier today, I had the privilege to preside over a ceremony where 55 locals became Australian citizens. Accompanied by their families and friends, Australia's newest citizens took the pledge before me, and I congratulate them on this momentous occasion and welcome them to our community as fellow Australians. A quick reminder that we are still in the middle of cyclone season, and the Bureau of Meteorology has forecast a high risk of a cyclone forming off the Kimberley coast north of Broome mid-next week. Forecasts at this stage are showing it will track south along the WA coast. It's still early days and cyclones can be very unpredictable, so the message right now is not to panic but to be prepared. Take the time now to make sure you have secured anything around your home that could become a projectile. Trim trees, clean up your yards, prepare and review your family cyclone plan, including your emergency kit. Keep up to date with the latest information from DFES or the Town of Port Hedland's disaster dashboard. More information on cyclone preparation can also be found on the town's website. This week is Harmony Week, which is an opportunity to celebrate the many cultures, languages and diversity in the Hedland community. The town is hosting a Harmony Week event at the J.D. Hardy Centre on Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. The family-friendly event will showcase cultural performances, food, art, music and interactive activities. For more information, head to the town's website. At this time of year in Hedland, it's really important to be mosquito aware. Mosquito numbers are expected to rise given recent wet weather. Mosquitoes carry serious, life-threatening and deadly diseases which have previously been detected in the Pilbara. The town's environmental health team is fogging as a control method, but you can play your part by clearing any pooled water around your home and report areas where treatment may be needed. Free Coupex residual sachets are available from all town facilities to help control mozzie numbers around your home. And to conclude on some good news, earlier today I accompanied the temporary CEO and the Director of Regulatory Services and observed the execution of the lease for the former Port Hedland Yacht Club. Whilst this was a project that was well underway when commissioners arrived at the town, I'm sure the community looked forward to the official opening later this year by WA-based Running With Thieves. I would like to thank the town staff for the extensive redevelopment work that has occurred to ready the site for its new owners and the completion of the commercial negotiations with the new lessee. We now move to item 4, public time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Clause 6.73 of the Town of Port Hedland Standing Orders Local Law requires members of the public wishing to ask a question to complete a question form and place the completed form in the tray provided. If myself as the presiding member determine that questions or statements are out of order due to the use of offensive or objectionable expressions or are defamatory, they will not be considered, recorded nor responded to. Public questions are allocated a minimum of 15 minutes under the Act. Public questions and statements received in writing will be provided the opportunity to be present first, followed by other members of the public. I declare public question time open at 5:37 p.m. CEO, have we received any questions?
None received, Chair.
Do any members of the public wish to ask any questions? Thank you. Please come forward and state your name and suburb. Please remember to fill in a public question time form if you haven't already done so.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jacinta Barrand and I'm a resident of South Hedland. I would like to ask 3 questions regarding agenda item 8.1.1, the communications agreement. First question is around timing and consultation. Given that this agreement is intended to govern the relationship between the elected council and the CEO, could you clarify why this is being proposed prior to the election of a council? And the agenda notes that this agreement has been reached following workshops with commissioners and the temporary CEO and the incoming CEO. But given that the incoming CEO was only appointed recently, is that sufficient consultation as well? Yeah, just mostly around that timing, because there's no council to have consultation and the incoming CEO.
Thank you for your question. And it's a good question, and it's something that the commissioners and I have been working on for some weeks, if not months. it is the case that later this year communications agreements will become mandatory, and when that occurs, that will likely be the trigger for when potentially a new CEO and a new council will need to consider either the default communications agreement, which will be gazetted by regulations, or they will have to agree on a communications agreement between the CEO and the council, and that will have to be adopted by council. So it is the case that the communications agreement under the model proposed by Parliament will be updated on a fairly regular basis. What the Commissioners and I wanted to ensure was that we did what we could in our time to set up a good basis, a good foundation for a new elected council to work from. Of course, a new elected council can change that communications agreement at their first meeting if they so choose. But it's something that will be good in terms of setting the relationship correctly early between the elected council and the administration, in our view.
Thank you. My further question is around responsiveness to the community. I note that in 2 areas it references response timeframes listed as 2 days from the initial receiving of that question, and then in the next section it says there will be a 5-day response period. I just wanted to clarify, is the 2-day response relating to the acknowledgement, that you'll get an acknowledgement of your inquiry within 2 days, and then 5 days for feedback on that? It was a bit strange, the wording.
Yep, I understand the question. Let me just have a look at it. I think you might be referring to... there's different timeframes, as I recall, for a request for information and a request for assistance regarding administrative matters. That might be the difference.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
So
okay.
a request for assistance regarding administrative matters, and they are listed. They range from assisting with declaration of gifts, travel arrangements and the like.
Yep.
That has a time frame of 2 business days. If this time frame cannot be met, an interim response must be provided.
Yep.
And then with respect to requests for information, it says a response will be provided within 5 working days, or an interim response outlining actions and timeframes must be provided. So you can imagine there might be some simple requests that could be answered almost immediately, but then perhaps some more detailed requests that require some analysis or some collation of information might take longer.
Would there be an escalation process as well if something was deemed urgent or critical for response?
I'm not sure. I might ask the CEO if he's aware of any. There certainly are dispute resolution processes built into the communications agreement if there is a dispute which could include the timeliness of information, but I might ask the CEO if he could add to
Yeah,
that.
thank you, Chair. Look, it would depend on what the question was and if it was relating to an emergency or something along those lines, or the availability and the resourcing of the staff. But if there was a critical issue that needed some form of urgency, then the CEO, I'm sure, would be liaising with the Mayor or the Council or the person that was asking the question.
Thank you. That wasn't my third question, it was all part of the second one. And then in there it does also mention about the proposed agreement indicates that requests may be refused or, if they are deemed not relevant to the role or considered to require unreasonable resources.
Yep.
Is there a threshold defined with regards to this? How will it be applied in practice? Any guidelines on if that is the response you receive, how that came to be?
Yeah, I might ask the CEO to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, it would depend on what the question was. I mean, if you saw a level of unreasonableness in relation to emails consistently being asked perhaps on the same question, I've seen situations where you may have seen, you know, several hundred on the questions. If it was being unreasonable, there would be a right for the CEO to say, look, you know, we've answered this question, we've responded, we're not going to take a further action on it. In relation to taking that further, that's not to stop a council from bringing a notice of motion to council to require further action from the Chief Executive Officer if the council so decides.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. Are there any further questions?
Renee Coles, 58 Green Place. I've only just got one only for what you highlighted here tonight, which is the importance of mosquito control. Can I request that the Town of Port Hedland, or ask of the Town of Port Hedland, please let our community know what areas are being fogged at what times? Last year, there's a few people who may mention, including myself, I was awake when the fogging machine went through. It came through the aircon system and it filled my room because my window was slightly ajar, and it really wasn't a very nice taste in the mouth as it went through. So if there is an opportunity for the town to let people know what areas are fogged and when they're getting fogged, that would be greatly appreciated, please.
I am going to allow some latitude because I did speak about mosquitoes in my opening statement, but at special council meetings, public question time and indeed public statement time can only relate to matters on the agenda.
Yep.
But I will allow it because I did mention it, so I might ask the CEO to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll refer that to the Director.
Through social media. Thank you. Regular updates.
Are there any further questions?
Hello, my name is Gillian Fisher. I reside at 3 Mitchie Crescent in South Hedland. I've just got a quick question, and it sort of goes to both of the things in the agenda and the attachments. With these ones that you're passing tonight or looking to pass tonight, can you give me the definition of the caretaker period that's involved with the election, and how the commissioners can set forth business like this when it is during the caretaker period? Maybe the CEO could answer that if you don't know that.
Section 3.73.
So I don't want to take the question on notice because I think you'd appreciate an answer tonight. So I'm just trying to give you something a bit more specific now. But a caretaker period is a fairly recent invention in the Local Government Act. It only applied, as I recall, perhaps from the last general local government elections. And it prevents a local government from doing significant acts. And there are some exemptions where you can seek ministerial approval or you can pre-approve significant acts being undertaken during the caretaker period. But significant acts are defined, and there are a number of things, including making a local law, entering into or renewing or terminating the contract of employment of the CEO, entering into a major land transaction, entering into a land transaction that's preparatory to entering into a major land transaction, commencing a major trading undertaking, entering into a contract or other agreement or arrangement worth or expected to be worth more than $250,000, inviting tenders worth more or expected to be worth more than $250,000, deciding to do anything referred to in paragraphs A to G, which are those I've just read out, or an act done under written law or otherwise that is a prescribed act.
Okay, can you give me the reference so I can just follow that up afterwards, only for my own benefit?
Section 3.73, subsection 5.
3.73, subsection 1. Yep, all good. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, I will close public question time at 5:48 p.m. And I declare public statement time open at 5:48 p.m. CEO, have we received any public statements?
None have been received in writing, Chair.
Thank you. Do any members of the public wish to make a public statement? Please come forward and state your name and suburb. Please remember to fill in a public statement time form if you haven't already done so.
Yes, my name is Gillian Fisher, again, 3 Mitchie Crescent. I'd just like to, in a roundabout way, congratulate the acting CEO on, after reading the health report, that he has taken these steps to engage the external agency More Australia Proprietary Limited to complete the health report. I think that's what the council and members of the public really need, because this is what we're often called dysfunctional, and I don't think that the issue is dysfunctional. This health report sort of shows in part that it is, when you look at the events of this week and the previous mayor, and obviously this health report, it's not exactly dysfunctional. It cannot be targeted at the councillors themselves, as that's what it has been a lot in the media, and that the local government minister has sort of implied that as well. So thank you. Very good.
Thank you. Are there any other public statements? If not, I'll close public statement time at 5:50 p.m. We now move to item 5, questions from members without notice. Are there any questions from commissioners?
Nope.
No. We've dealt with item 6. Item 7, declarations of all members to have given due consideration to all matters contained in the business paper before the meeting. I invite all commissioners to declare by show of hands that they have given due consideration to all matters contained within the agenda. We now move on to reports of officers. 8.1, executive services. 8.1.1 is the Town of Port Hedland Communications Agreement, and we have an officer's recommendation as displayed on the screen that requires a simple majority. Can I have a mover for the officer's recommendation?
I'm happy to move the motion.
Commissioner Shaw, do I have a seconder?
Yes, I am pleased to second that.
Commissioner Jurjevic has seconded. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just very briefly, thank you, Chair. All I would say is that this is another of the suite of policies that we have, or improvements that we've tried to make as commissioners during our time here. And just note that we really are intent, when we finish our time here, to, so much as possible, reinstitute practices into the town of Port Hedland that are standardised across the state. And as Commissioner Aldridge pointed out in his response to a question earlier, these agreements will be compulsory very shortly, and it is important that the town of Port Hedland, or the newly elected council, gets off to a strong start. And I commend the staff for their preparation of the document, and I do hope that it formalises protocols, respectful engagement, and the more effective flow of information between council and the administration. And obviously I support the agreement.
Does the seconder wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Also to back up Commissioner Shaw's comment then, but from someone who's been in local government for many, many years, I think this is a great step forward in the operation of any council in Western Australia. And as we said, it's going to become compulsory shortly anyway. It's good that, well, we've made the decision that we're going to bring it in early, simply because it is an instrumental tool of good governance in local government. And while these things will change over the years, I'm sure that the new incoming council will appreciate what they have in front of them when they have their first meeting, and start sitting down and conducting business for the betterment of the town of Port Hedland.
Okay, I think there was a lag on the video, but I think the audio finished. Thanks, Commissioner Jurjevic. I'll also contribute to this motion. I support the adoption of a communications agreement to establish some guardrails and expectations of both council and the administration in the way in which they interact. Council has a legislative right to access information held by the town under section 5.92 of the Local Government Act 1995. This agreement establishes the framework by which requests for information and requests for assistance are managed. From the outset, I want to advise that I have a minor amendment to Part 2 of the officer's recommendation to improve its accuracy whilst retaining its intent, which I will come to. Whilst the officer's report sets out the legislative framework by which communications agreements have been established by Parliament, it is important to note that those provisions have not yet been proclaimed by the Governor. A consultation paper was released by the then Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries with feedback required by 22 August 2025. Draft regulations and a default communications agreement have also been consulted on. It is expected that communications agreements are, as envisaged by Parliament, may be in operation by the end of this calendar year. However, there is no guarantee that this will be the case. The communications agreement before Council tonight is a proactive initiative of the town, and I thank the town staff for the workshops and consultation that has occurred on this. Whilst it reflects the broad policy intent of communications agreements that will become mandatory, it is a response in the short term which ultimately will be replaced by the default communications agreement once gazetted, and a town-specific communications agreement if one is adopted by Council following the agreement of the CEO. I turn now to the agreement. The agreement sets out the principles and purpose of the agreement, including the legislative basis supporting the role of a council and its subsequent right to access information. It establishes procedures to guide elected members and the CEO in dealing with a request for information or assistance, including a procedure to resolve disputes. The agreement suggests that it will survive until the next scheduled ordinary local government election, which is scheduled for October 2027. However, in all likelihood, the agreement will be redundant with the proclamation of section 5.92 capital A to 5.92 capital C of the Local Government Amendment Act 2023. I now turn to my amendment. My amendment, if adopted, will delete paragraph 2 and replace it with the following text. 2. Notes that the temporary Chief Executive Officer has agreed with the terms of the agreement. This is important as it reflects the current law of Western Australia, that is, communication agreements do not currently exist in the Local Government Act of 1995, and therefore there is no legislative provision requiring that this agreement be first agreed by the CEO. Whilst this is the intent of the legislative reform, the officer's report identifies that both the temporary CEO and the incoming CEO have agreed to the terms of the agreement. I now move an amendment to delete part 2 of the motion and replace it with 2. Notes that the temporary Chief Executive Officer has agreed with the terms of the agreement. I commend the amendment to Council. Do I have a seconder for the amendment?
I'm happy to
Yes.
second that. Oh, sorry, either.
Seconded by Commissioner Shaw. Does anybody does the seconder wish to speak to the amendment?
No, I think you've covered it off very well, Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the amendment? No?
No, thank you, Chair.
Is anyone opposed to the amendment? No? If not, I'll declare the amendment carried. We're now dealing with the amended motion, and the question is that the amended motion be agreed. Is anyone opposed? If not, I'll declare the amended motion carried by simple majority. We now move to 8.1.2, Town of Port Hedland Health Check. And we have an officer's recommendation as displayed on the screen that requires a simple majority vote. I think before we move to that, I understand there may be some interest in asking some questions for clarification on this item.
I have a series of questions through the Chair.
Yep, Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say how important this exercise is to the future, I believe, of the town of Port Hedland. It's a significant undertaking and has raised a number of issues that it's very important that the council takes incredibly seriously. And for very good reasons. The report itself is confidential, but I do want to tease out just some of the comments that the CEO has made, or temporary CEO has made, in his covering note, just to try and understand where to from here with a document that has such significant implications for the town. So first question relates to the comments that are made around the executive leadership team developing an improvement plan and the establishment of a steering group. I just wondered if the temporary CEO might be able to shed some light into what the composition of that steering group will be, and how people will be appointed to it.
CEO?
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation and the attachment is looking at the CEO developing this remediation plan, which will require a steering group to actually work through each of these particular matters and come up with a series of recommendations, which may very well, Commissioner, be required to go to ARIC or to Council. Some of them will be administered by their very, very nature, and also I believe that the Chief Executive Officer, as I've also put in the report there, may require some assistance considering the number of operational changes that may need to be made. The steering group in itself will identify the items that are listed in the health check for improvement, and that will actually see the probable development of a future plan that may be coming before Council shortly that will actually need to be worked through as an operational plan. I also noted in the report that there was a number of issues that had been outstanding for some years, and each of those issues need to be given their own priority listing, their own matrix, and worked through with the Chief Executive Officer, and probably initially with myself as the temporary CEO. We'll look at if Council supports this, starting immediately.
Just further questions. So my question was to the composition of the steering group and how people would be appointed to it. So thanks very much for contextualising it. But so who if Council does support this evening, as I say, who would be on the steering group, and how would they be appointed?
Through the Chair, that would be a determination of myself. A lot of these matters are administrative in their nature, and I guess the piece that I'm looking at the moment from myself, and I can't speak for Mr Stewart, is maybe there's a requirement for another support person that will assist. But most of these functions really need administrative change, so it'll be dealt with primarily as the health check operationally.
Okay, so the answer to my question is that the CEO will determine who's on the steering group. Is that correct?
That's correct, through the Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so then moving on to the ERP project, which at the last ARIC committee meeting, I was at some pains to try and get some answers around as well. That obviously represents a significant financial risk to the town, and I think it's great that that this is something that's been identified in the health check as warranting further investigation. You talk in your paper about an end-to-end assessment of the program and its functionality. Could you give a bit of a flavour of what that also would look like?
CEO?
Through the Chair. Look, the ERP's been in place since 2022. And as identified in that ARIC meeting, I spoke at that ARIC meeting as well, Commissioner, was that the costs are around $9 million to roll that out. What I really would like to do to actually understand is why would that be over a 5-year period, and actually go back to the original scope of what happened in 2022 to where we currently are, and just test the assumptions. From, I guess, my 3.5 months with the organisation, having some of the systems that are identified in the ERP not being rolled out is having an impact on parts of the business. I understand that there's a resourcing issue that's associated with that, and the team is working through that. But the ERP is such an essential part of the business. I would like to test those assumptions. The investment has been made into the ERP, but I believe that there's a need to actually accelerate that. And then to do that, we really need to do a whole end-to-end assessment and then come up with a series of further recommendations for council, because there may be additional cost associated with that, and if that's the case, the council needs to be aware of those.
Thank you. It certainly was of concern to me the other evening that I asked a series of questions about whether there'd been that organisational learning out of the cost blowouts that already exist. So I think this is going to be a vital exercise for process involved for organisational improvement, and obviously that's a core function of the ARIC committee. My next question relates to governance, and I do want to tease out your point that you made in your answer to my previous question about an additional director. I must admit that in my time with the town, I've firmly of the view that some sort of general counsel or some sort of additional support to the CEO, just strengthening that governance and accountability function may well be of real value, and particularly in light of the challenges that have been flagged in the organisational health check. But perhaps you could go into a little more detail about how you, if the council does support that recommendation, how you would envisage that role functioning.
Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the question. This is a fifth director. So one of the officers that's advising the Chief Executive Officer and is specialised. As it was identified within the report, and I wrote in the health check, some of the primary and secondary checks in relation to procurement and other components need to be perhaps taken away from perhaps that finance area and just dedicated into a person. I believe that some of the change mechanisms, from my own experience, may take between 18 months and 2 years to actually work through. I think there's significant change that needs to be happening. The Chief Executive Officer, the role at Port Hedland is very, very diverse and very, very complex. And it can't just be looking at the governance issues. It needs to be looking at the growth of the town, the vision for that, and understanding that the finance of the organisation need to be managed well. My recommendation for the additional director was to really key in and look at a whole series of recommendations for the CEO has, and all that may also come out of the steering group and actually work through them. I don't believe that the number of operational changes or alignments that need to be made can really just be done with just the Chief Executive Officer on his own, and that additional support is required. I also was very conscious of the survey that was undertaken by the community, and the strong result that came back that the communities really want to see really strong governance change. And I think that the council, and you'll note in the health check I've said, as per budget deliberations, that the council really should consider this. I know that's a significant cost, but I believe to actually make this change, a limited term contract should be put in place for 3 years and really work through with the CEO on getting these projects achieved. I hope that answers your question, Commissioner.
Thank you. No, that's great. And I think given the issues that have come to light through the health check, it's probably a full-time job. Just dealing with the health check. I just want to tease out the role of audit. We've had a couple of questions during our time of commissioners and folk who have recollections of external audits that have been done in the past, but we haven't been able to find any record of that. In light of the significant issues that have been unearthed in the organisational health check, I just wondered if some form of forensic audit isn't warranted to really. I mean, this health check is not an investigation, and that's been made very, very clear to us, and rightly so. So there are no sort of findings of fact, but there are some issues that are signposted in there that are grave. Some sort of forensic audit or some sort of external end-to-end beyond the ERP, just to get to the bottom of some of the challenges that have arisen. I just wonder what the CEO's view might be of that.
Chair. Sierra.
Thanks, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. Yes, I think, again, working through the steering committee or any improvement plans that may be coming forward into the future, each of those particular projects may require a level of further investigation or assessment as to how the matter has occurred and come up with some recommendations. One of the key pieces that the Moore report and what my written report is trying to identify is that there's been a number of years where some of these things have remained consistently outstanding, and there's a need for a real operational plan and resources being allocated into those so that those things can actually be resolved, which may have been as a result of resourcing, or if issues are consistently coming up again, what are our operating procedures or our internal operating procedures, and how do we make improvements to some of those? So the only way I believe that you can actually keep doing it is do some forensic auditing on some of those components, if you want to use that word, really dive into the piece. I use the word with the staff, we really need to walk into the wind on these matters and actually really have a good look at them and actually look at how that's affecting the business and the organisational change that's associated, so that Port Hedland really becomes a place of excellence. But you've got to allocate resources to it, and you've got to actually make sure that culture change is made. And that's also challenging for the business, you know, with some of the turnover that we actually have as well with employees.
Thank you. Just a question, a follow on from that, I suppose, and that is about just generally the way that audit and risk functions are reported through to council, and the importance of ensuring that risks that are identified, and there are many risks identified in this report. Will the improvement plan that you're working on, or are you considering ways of improving the way that audit and risk is not just managed by the administration, but then reported through to council to improve its function in governance and respect the important role that councils have in governing and making sure that risks, serious material risks to the council, are identified and appropriately managed?
Yes, I would say most definitely. With the changes to what we now call ARIC as an acronym, it's about not just audit or financial or systems, but also about improvements. So we've got to take a different level of maturity assessment in relation to how ARIC works. And ARIC is that committee that actually has statutory functions, and it needs to then report some of those components back to council. So I think the recommendations that will come forward and what the improvement plan will identify is actually engaging some of those components with ARIC that perhaps we haven't done in a more detailed way in the past, but that's part of a learning and also understanding of what the changes, I guess, that state government's wanting to do in relation to how improvements can be put forward and the way in which we're actually using the committee. Of course, it's a committee. The committee makes recommendations, considerations, and the council then considers those and endorses them if required.
So, further question. I've only got a couple more, and then I'll shut up. But in light, as I say, of the grave issues that have come through this, and you know, the new council will have an opportunity to review this report and can make their own minds up, and obviously will set the cadence. But just wondered on your thoughts. The ARIC at the moment only meets quarterly. You've acknowledged that we need potentially a fifth director, and I'm firmly of the view that just managing this will be a full-time job. I just wondered your thoughts on potentially the cadence of the meeting of the ARIC committee, whether it might be for a period of time whilst they work through so many of the complex issues in this report, and given the gravity, whether it might be worth the ARIC meeting more frequently to just ensure that given that there has clearly been some shortcomings in governance and oversight at some point, to just kind of ensure that correct oversight and governance functions being exercised.
Thank you. I think that's a question also for council, considering that there'll be a number of issues that will come out from the health check and actually putting those through to ARIC. At the moment, we've got those quarterly meetings. They may want to actually consider going bi-monthly, but again, I think they'll be guided by the substantive CEO. We can start some of the components with the amount of time that I have, but I think the CEO really needs to have that discussion with Council, and if necessary, actually look at increasing that frequency.
Okay, my final question's on human resource management, and your report notes that the health checks identified systemic deficiencies in the town's HR, governance, workforce controls, workplace management practices. And you say the deficiencies materially limit the level of assurance available to council that recruitment, employment decisions, workplace conduct matters, delegations, allowances and HR systems changes are being managed consistently, transparently and in accordance with approved policies, procedures and legislative requirements. That's a fairly hefty paragraph right there. But my question is, are appropriate supports being put in place for staff? Because quite clearly, this is quite a serious. This has been a serious exercise. There's been a lot of challenges unearthed. I just want to make sure that the right protections are being put in place and the right supports are being put in place for your team.
Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Look, I believe that WHS, the psychosocial safety components, need to be assessed, identified in the report, and there should be annual performance appraisals, speaking with staff, talking about some of those components. In some cases, I had staff that have actually come to me personally and say that they haven't had performance appraisals done for 3 years, even though there's legislative requirement to do those. The report will, and the steering committee will, be looking at some of those HR functions and how they've been administered, and making sure that improvements are administered, because there are quite a number of those that we really need to actually have a good look at, and how perhaps some of those things are being reported to the Chief Executive Officer. You know, there should be no direct appointments. There needs to be ensure that we're going through transparency and EO principles, and that they're being addressed appropriately.
Thank you. That's it from me for the moment.
Commissioner Jurevich, did you have any questions before we consider the officer's recommendation? No. If not, we'll turn to the officer's recommendation, which is found on page 8 of the agenda. Can I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? If not, I will propose an alternative motion that I will move, that Council 1 notes the organisational health check report, the report, undertaken by the Temporary Chief Executive Officer. 2, notes the draft CEO action and assurance roadmap developed in response to the findings and recommendations of the report. 3, refers the report and the CEO action and assurance roadmap to the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee for its consideration. And 4, directs the Temporary Chief Executive Officer to develop a remediation plan to be considered for adoption by Council at its April Ordinary Council meeting, including recommendations as to how Council and the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee be informed of progress toward the plan. Can I have a seconder for that motion?
I'm happy to second the motion.
Commissioner Shaw. I'll speak to the motion. The genesis of this matter was the Ordinary Council meeting on 10 December 2025, when Council authorised the Temporary CEO to seek a suitably qualified independent consultant and expend funds. It is worthy to note that the Temporary CEO authored that report within the first week of his employment with the town, and I quote from his report at that time. This report will assist the Temporary Chief Executive Officer to rapidly assess operations of the town's administrative practices, make improvements or changes where possible, and subsequently provide an operational report and roadmap to assist the new substantive Chief Executive Officer when this person is appointed into the role, end quote. This was not an investigation, as the report for this meeting reaffirms, but rather an examination of systems, processes, and the overall performance of the organisation. It is noted that the Temporary CEO has prepared a draft remediation roadmap, and that the ELT are in the process of developing an improvement plan arising from the report's findings and recommendations. The temporary CEO's report on governance and leadership reaffirms that Council has made the right decision by finalising the recruitment of a substantive CEO, something that has been in abeyance for long enough. The impact of consistent and stable leadership cannot be underestimated on organisational culture and performance. Another positive in this section is the collaboration that is already occurring between the temporary CEO and the incoming CEO, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stewart commences on 11 May 2026, shortly after the election of a new council, and an orderly transition is required to ensure continuity of governance and leadership. The recommendation by the temporary CEO that an additional Directorate of Governance be included in the organisational structure is something that the incoming council and CEO must consider in the context of the formation of the next budget, which is looming. Whilst this will add cost in the short term to the town, it may prove a sound long-term investment in ensuring we maintain a high-performing organisation. Whilst it is important that we understand our deficiencies, it is also important that we reflect on the enormous potential of the organisation, particularly when you consider the calibre of staff that I've had the opportunity to interact with. They have integrity, ambition and commitment to the town, and with a permanent CEO and a new elected council, Port Hedland can once again kick goals in the region. Whilst it will be the town's administration and specifically the CEO that will be charged with responding to the findings and recommendations, it is appropriate in the circumstances, in my view, that Council remains informed of progress. This motion will ensure that the remediation plan, once finalised by the administration, has input from Council and, more importantly, is oversighted by Council. That is not to say that the Council should become involved in the administration, but the extreme risks presented in the Moore report and as summarised in the officer's report cannot be ignored. It is insufficient, in my view, for Council to simply adopt the officer's recommendation, which does nothing more than support the CEO in preparing a roadmap for remediation. Council receives a quarterly report on the performance of our visitor centre. Why would we not expect to receive regular reporting on how the administration is addressing the matters identified in the Moore report? My motion also presents an argument for the involvement of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. The objective of the ARIC, in accordance with its terms of reference, are to oversee the integrity of internal and external financial reporting, including accounting policies, the scope of work, objectivity, performance, independence of the external auditor, the establishment, effectiveness and maintenance of controls and systems to safeguard the town's financial and physical resources, the systems or procedures that are designed to ensure that the town and its subsidiaries comply with relevant statutory and regulatory requirements, the process for recognising risks arising from the town's operations and strategies, and consider the adequacy of measures taken to manage those risks, the process and systems which protect the council against fraud and irregularities, compliance with laws and regulations, as well as use of best practice guidelines relative to audit, risk management, internal control and legislative compliance, and finally, to provide guidance and assistance to council as to the carrying out of the functions of the local government in relation to audits. With those words, I commend the motion to council. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. Firstly, I think that your comments capture so many of the issues that we as a group have discussed. I just want to underline the seriousness of this report and just how much I hope it contributes to the improvement of the systems, processes, and performance of the town of Port Hedland. We, during our time here, have really tried to institute policies and procedures, bring everything up to date, and to address a lot of the issues, both with respect to the functioning of council, but also the work of the administration. And as you say, as the Chair correctly says, there are some absolutely fantastic staff, hardworking, motivated, and doing their very best for the town. But we can't be blind to the fact that over a period of years, there would seem to have been a series of issues that have built up, and that affects the entire community. And I think that that's kind of reflected in the feedback we got from the community survey. So we've now had two very independent reference points telling us that things need to change at the town of Port Hedland, and so they're backward looking. So those both of them were sort of, well, where have we come from? But hopefully they will both be utilised for the major strategic review with a new council and with a new CEO to chart a new way forward. This is all about improvement, and I certainly hope that that the work that the CEO has done here, the temporary CEO has done here, is going to really improve matters for the town. One thing I think it would be very important to consider is the utilisation of the monitor through this process as well, who was extensively involved as Chair of Commissioners for the City of Perth. So this isn't his first rodeo dealing with organisations that have had some challenges. So I certainly wish the monitor all the very best as he supports the new CEO into this next phase. I do want to also strongly agree with the comments that were made around the role of council and the oversight function and governance, and the importance of a functional relationship and respect for the roles of the council and the roles of the administration. They have to work hand in glove. It's often said that the role of a council is noses in, fingers out. That's right. But it's not noses out too. And if there's a more constructive and collaborative relationship between council and between the administration, that I genuinely hope will be facilitated by the communications agreement that we passed earlier on tonight, I really do think that things can be considerably improved for the town of Port Hedland. So with that said, I obviously fully support the motion and thank the temporary CEO for his work.
Does Commissioner Jurjevic wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Chair.
No. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? No. If not, I'll declare the motion carried by simple majority. We now move to item 9, matters for which a meeting may be closed to the public, which there is none. And 10, closure. I thank the commissioners, members of the public, the CEO and his staff for their attendance. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 6:26 p.m. Thank you.